So there's two stickies here. One says Way Hot and one says Earp Sisters.
Oh, I got one too.
Which one do you want to be?
You get to be Way
yes,
Hot.
you're right. That makes sense.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. You know, Avery and I were backstage just thinking, we really appreciate you being here. We realize there's like a happy hour happening and probably other things. And we're going to talk about, religious trauma. So we were like, oh, people that want to come and hang out during the con to talk about that, we really appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. How many people here have heard of Bad Believer? Okay, there's a couple that haven't. Perfect. Cool. If you hadn't, or if everyone had, I would probably have just skipped the spiel, but let's do it. Okay. So it's wild because right before this, I was just with Kat, who was signing a couple last-minute auction pieces for us, who just gave us a ton of auction pieces to raise money for the nonprofit, which was so generous. And I had a quick chance back there because there were a lot of folks, and Melanie was there too, and had never heard of Bad Believer either. So it was actually really cool to let her know that the reality is Bad Believer absolutely came into existence from Winona Earp. I mean, that is just a fact. Without the show, this organization wouldn't exist. And basically the short of it is when I released Ghost in 2020, which is like my song, coming out song, the music supervisor for the show knew it was my coming out song and knew that that was an important moment in my life, and also knew there was a scene coming in the show that felt like it would be very powerful to kind of pair a song that has that kind of meaning behind it with these characters. And it ended up being in the show on the stairs. You all know. But the way that Bad Believer came to be was, so I'm a Pentecostal minister's daughter. And when I was grappling with my queerness, my spiritual life and grappling with what it meant was a huge part of that. If anyone comes from a religious background, you know that being gay and Christian, or being gay in any spiritual, religious sort of organization, is just not something that is talked about. I felt extremely lonely because I couldn't talk about it with my Christian friends because that's a no-no. And then I felt I couldn't really talk about it with my queer friends because it was so triggering. And there's a lot of feelings that you can't be gay and blank. And so I felt like I was very much in the middle, and I felt like I was the only one. So when I released the music video for Ghost, I wrote a little bit about that experience in the description of the YouTube video, mostly because I felt like no one would read it. I mean, how many of you go to YouTube and actually read the description of the video? Oh, that's so nice. That's good to know, because as an artist, I'm like, I don't know if anyone's going to read this. It's usually just directed by, special thanks. But mine was like, oh my gosh, I've been feeling so alone. Just an opportunity for me to share about what it's like. And then it sat there in the description of the video for months. And then 402 happened. And all of you wonderful folks started going and looking for the song online, and people clicked read more. And so I started getting thousands of messages from people all over the world saying, me too, this is my story. I also felt like God was restricted from me. I still don't know how to reconcile it. I often don't feel I have permission to be both, or to even have the autonomy and agency to make that decision, which is why our motto is your spiritual life is your birthright, because it became a thing where I'm like, on what planet are we not allowed to have a fundamental human experience of having a spiritual life? It is like breathing and eating. It is all, to me, the same. So I felt like it was so sad that I and a lot of other people were feeling that way. So I put up a Google form for people to sign up for calls. And hundreds of people signed up for these calls, and then I was like, whoa, I guess I'm gonna live on Zoom for a while. And what was wild about it is after maybe 5 or 6 of these calls, because there were like maybe 9 people in each call, after five or six of them, people were coming in and having these like incredible moments together where they were maybe feeling seen for the first time fully, because it's so hard to meet queer people that come from the same religious background. We had Mormons coming in, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christians, lots of different kinds of religions, primarily Christian, just because a lot of the people that come in are from the from the United States. But they all were having these calls and then basically just looking at me going, well, now what? Like, this was great, now what? So it became very clear very early in, okay, this is something. So we started organizing really, really quickly to try to make it a nonprofit, because we felt like, okay, then at least we have some autonomy and agency to distribute funds and things like that. So then it became a time for us we needed a board, and I had met Avery in one of those calls and knew very, very quickly that I wanted Avery to be on the board. And it was a unique situation because I didn't really know anyone very well. So it was a wild thing of just being like, I'm following my instincts here, and Avery has a lot of credentials in therapy world that I don't. And it became very evident that we needed someone with that. So that is how, this is Avery, everyone. Yes. Thank you. Avery is on the board. So Avery, how did you come in? So what was that experience like?
So I was doom scrolling on Twitter right before the election and contemplating moving to Canada or really any country that might take me, depending on how that turned out. And Twitter will sometimes say, like, hey, you may be interested in. And it said, you may be interested in Bad Believer for LGBTQ folks with religious trauma. And I was like, why, yes. Yes, I am. And I clicked on it, and I was at work, I was doing some paperwork, and clicked on, you had done a podcast interview with a psychologist, I think. Mm-hmm. And you came in and you were talking, and you said the little tagline of your spiritual life is your birthright. And I immediately sort of teared up. Mm. Now, I am a therapist. The best and worst part of being a therapist is that you have to like constantly work on your own stuff when it comes up, right? And before I went to school to become a clinical social worker, I was in school to become a minister, and had gotten through a year of it, and had gotten some incredibly negative messages about what the church that I was a part of thought of queer folks, about whether or not it was possible to be ordained as a queer person. And I realized that I couldn't continue to be my authentic self and stay in that world. And I left because I realized that I didn't need to change or hide who I was to be able to help people, which is what I wanted to do. So went to school, became a therapist. But I realized when I sort of had this like really emotional reaction that even all these years later, clearly there were some wounds that still needed to be healed. So I signed up for an initial call. And it was like a month out or something. And I spent this whole month going, why did I sign up for this? I'm not really going to do this because I don't join things. I don't follow through or do things. And then it was like the calendar was counting down, and I was like, oh, I'm doing this. And then while you were talking, you said something about mental health in the call or whatever. And I think I just sent you a message and said, hey, I do mental health stuff.
And I was like, thank God. Well, it was wild when it started because people were coming in really quickly, and there was so much need. And one of the things that I think I struggle with church is I feel, and I grew up with this, and it's something I've had to unlearn, is there's a lot of taking on things that you're just not equipped to do. Like a lot of ministers are therapists, they haven't had any kind of official training, and so oftentimes these religious figures, the minister or the priest or whoever, is sort of like a catch-all for all things, and I think that is incredibly dangerous. So I knew very early in that I'm like, I have some skills and I know exactly where those skills should go, and I know where they shouldn't go, because I am not a therapist. I have no training, and we had people early in having we got, we had some crisis calls and just like a lot of, and I knew very early in, I was like, oh my God, I really, really need some people on the team that have the credentials. So when Avery messaged and said, hey, I was like overly eager. And then remember when I asked you to be on the board, how nervous I was? I was so nervous. I was asking them out. It was like, hi, it was just so, I was like sweating because I know it's a big ask. Like it's volunteer work, and I always want to be cognizant of people's time and energy. So
here's the thing. So as someone, as I said, who's not a joiner, right? I don't join, I don't do things. So yeah, you asked me to be on the board, and I immediately said yes. And I didn't think about it. And the reason why is because right before you asked me, I'd said to you, it's a really amazing thing that you did in sort of making all these calls. And you said, well, that's what anyone would do.
Yeah, I felt that.
And the truth is that's not what anyone would do. Not anyone would look at like thousands of YouTube comments and go, I need to get all these people together to talk. And I need to build a community.
That's so sweet. Oh, thank you. Right? I mean, I think, but I do.
So when you said that, I knew who you were.
Oh.
And I knew that whatever you were doing, I wanted to be a part of it.
I'm like that emoji with the little eyes right now. Like if that's very sweet. Love you. And it's incredible because it's been now it'll be 3 years that we started in the fall, and you've become one of my closest friends, and it's wild because this song gave me like my whole life. It's wild, like my girlfriend, Avery, all these people, it's like this song and this show. And so really, I think what joins us all together in Bad Believer is, I was saying in our meet and greet last night, we have people sometimes come into the nonprofit that are not Earpers. And they're always like, what is this show that everyone talks about? And one thing that I try to make really clear in these calls, and we'll go through a little bit of what we do so it's clear to you all. But one thing that I try to say in these calls very early in is, just so you know, like we are not a sneaky evangelical group. Yeah. Because sometimes they be super sneaky. Like it's like there's a lot of bait and switch. Like it's like, oh no, we just give food away. And then all of a sudden it's like, here's the sinner's prayer. I'm like, no. We're really we're a group of faith and non-faith folks. In fact, probably more non-faith folks. But I do say to people, if we were to have any kind of gospel, it would probably be the gospel of Winona Earp. That's pretty much it. Like if anyone comes, and that's the closest we come to a religion. And then like people come in and they're like, whoa, everyone's watched this show. But we are starting to get more folks in now that don't know the show. And we're starting to see we're reaching beyond the borders of the show, which is really our goal. Like we really do think that there are people all over the world that are dealing with this. And just so we have a sense, if you feel comfortable, show of hands, how many of you grew up in a religious environment? Okay, yeah. And if you didn't, if you didn't grow up in a religious environment, how many of you feel like even though you didn't grow up that way, that the messages still reached you? Yeah. That's why something that we notice a lot for people coming into our calls is like a lot of feeling of like, I don't know if I'm religious. And Avery, you say this a lot, the religious trauma, that word, I think a lot of people are like, I don't know if that applies to me. Like that seems like maybe this is for people that have gone through conversion therapy experiences, and of course we do have that in our group. But one thing I say often is we have tons of folks who come into Bad Believer who grew up in atheist homes, but feel like the messaging has been so strong that they still, like in quiet moments of life, wonder, like, am I lost? Like, am I going? And this is like a triggering thing, and we can talk more, but I would say the number one thing that people have, for me, I notice coming into calls, is a fear of hell. Like that is something that feels pretty universal for a lot of folks. And we deal a lot with like moving through that and rewriting those tapes. And a story I like to tell is that we had someone in our group who was a minister, and she had spent her whole life rewriting these tapes from childhood. and felt very good about the work she had done. She felt pretty good that she had let a lot of that go. And then one night she got in a car accident, and she noticed that the thought she felt was, please don't send me to hell. These messages are extremely pervasive, whether you are Christian or come from a Christian background or you're not. And the reality is, and we try not to sugarcoat it, is that we're all going to spend our whole lives rewriting these narratives. Like, this is not a quick fix, but it is a whole lot better doing it together. You know, like, that's the thing, is that when I came out, or when I was looking online, I couldn't find anything that made like this. And so it's so nice being able to get together and just have an honest conversation. Like, last month we talked a lot about internalized homophobia. We have a lot of that just because growing up in churches, thinking that prides are like too much, or there's a lot of things that we all go through. So that is definitely like the arc of how it all came together. So Avery, can you talk a little bit about, there's my about. Did you hear my Canadian? Yes, about. Yes, Canadians in the room. Can you talk a little bit about what we do? What would you say we primarily do?
Yeah, primarily.
Or all of it.
Great, better.
Okay. Yeah, that's a better question. And alphabetize it. I'm just kidding.
Done.
Yeah.
So I think the great thing about our community is how wide the spectrum is,
Yeah.
right? So you talked a little bit about the spectrum of folks that we have, and when we talk about religious trauma, trauma can look like all kinds of things, right? So if you're talking about your body, trauma can be a bruise, right? It's there, it's sore, or trauma can be a fracture or a break or a coma. There can be this huge range of things that looks like traumas. And so we have some folks that have gotten these like really negative messages from society, and they're trying to rewrite those. And we have some folks that have had some really powerful, damaging experiences from their church that was their community for a while. And so wherever folks are in that path, we want to meet them there. And so that means we do a variety of different things. And I think what we always tell folks is, come for what serves you, leave the rest. We're happy to see you, whether you're there for every event or whether you pop into Discord for 5 minutes and say, hi friends, how are you?
Yeah.
Everyone's happy to see you. And I think the hallmark of everything we do is that everyone leads with openness and kindness and compassion for everyone else who's there and whatever story they have. So, on to the actual things that we do.
That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a number of different events. Folks come into the community through these initial calls, where it's just a chance to sort of tell however much of your story you're comfortable talking about, hold other people's stories, and start to sort of experience that community. It's also just a chance for us to get to know folks. One of the most important things is that we want this community to be a safe space and to continue to be a safe space. So we just want to know who folks are as they come in.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, the doors are wide open. So we have a lot of different events each month, everything from workshops that talk about different elements of sort of mental health, like internalized homophobia, always fun for Pride Month.
Yes.
But, you know, we spent a couple months working on the differences between shame and guilt and how to rewrite different shame messages that we've had. We will talk about the coming out process with the recognition that coming out isn't a one-time thing, that it's something that you have to go through and navigate through the rest of your life, and what that's like. We've got a group for folks 45 and older, is that the cutoff?
Yes. It's called Age to Perfection.
Age to Perfection. That group is a bit sassy.
They
and,
are.
We're all
right there.
we're all a bit intimidated by them. So it's
We're all just waiting to get in.
I know, but I think there's an initiation process. I don't know. It feels very intimidating. We have a group that meets once a month to kind of talk about biblical readings and teachings and things that we may have learned about and heard. And folks can talk about it from different perspectives of, I was raised Southern Baptist and we read this passage this way. And well, wait, in Catholicism, we sort of read it this way. And to finally kind of be able to challenge and explore things.
Yep.
We also have some really fun events. We'll do watch parties. There may be an occasional online scavenger hunt.
That Avery always wins. Please, if you can, if someone just wants to join to just beat Avery, I would be
Bring it.
like, oh
it.
my God, please.
Bring it. There's an entire contingency in Scotland that's trying to take me down.
Yeah.
Okay?
And they can't.
I have a nation that's against me. All right? We occasionally have a dance party.
Yeah.
So there are different events each month, which is just a chance for sort of bigger community to come together. We also have small groups that meet, follow-up calls, that just become a space for kind of ongoing support, and those folks get to know each other so well and become tight-knit, tiny communities that really lift each other up. And there's probably a bit of nonsense in those calls as well, a bit of fun. And the thing about our community is that we are always evolving to see what folks need and how we can meet those needs. So we have community members that have wanted to volunteer and sort of become more of part of it. So we have a welcome team of folks that want to help bring folks into the community and help get them oriented. And we have one of our most popular teams is our peer support team of folks that want to be available for when someone's having a tough time to be able to reach out and support them. We have a commitment to mental health. And so we also help people connect with therapy and with therapists if that's something that they would like. But also we like to think that our ears and our doors are always open. And if folks come to us and they're like, we really want to have this event. So we had somebody that got to come and say, I'd really like to have a group for couples. Can I start that? Great. And they meet once a month?
Yeah, Couples Corner. Yeah.
And it's wonderful. And yeah, we're only 3 years old. We're new and we're growing, and we're just going to continue to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a great rundown.
Thank you.
Avery. Well, let's give a round of applause. That was fantastic. Yes. Yeah, and we also are pretty active. I mean, there's ebbs and flows, but we have a Discord channel. So that is like a daily check-in. So if someone just wants to come in, one thing we are committed to, which we have in Discord, is we haven't been doing a lot in there lately, but we should again. There was a year where we were in there a lot, is we have like a channel that is sassy. And it's like, we call it like, it's sort of like a place to flirt, not with each other, well, unless you want to. But more so, we have a big commitment of sort of exploring the multifaceted ways that this has affected us. And last night in the concert, I'm not sure if people were there, but I talked a bit about purity culture, and that's something we have a lot in our community. So it's growing up sort of with these messages of like being disconnected from your body, not, a lot of, abstinence teaching. So there's a lot of folks, when you're queer and you grow up in that system, there's a lot of people who have like genuinely never flirted before. Like they've never experienced any kind of connection in that way. So we're unique in the sense that we're like, yeah, let's do a biblical passage study and then like go put on like Pony by Genuine and just like see what happens. It is like trying to address like some of the way, I think the way that I feel church sometimes, it has such a narrow view and doesn't often allow for the exploration of the fact that we are physical beings. A lot of people come in very disconnected from their bodies. I myself was extremely disconnected from my body, and a part of my journey has been like, even with the dance parties, like embodying myself is something that we try to do. So we have like a room in there for that, and we have tons of rooms in Discord. So if you're a fan of Discord, you can join our channel. But what Avery said is so fair. We really do try to make it clear. One thing that I think we're all seeing in the world right now is the church is really being taken to task over how it can sometimes make people feel guilty for not being there all the time. Whether it's that you're a volunteer and you feel like you have, or if you don't show up on Sunday one week, all of a sudden, their spiritual life is in the toilet, like whatever it might be, all of these narratives. So we're very clear that this organization is not about gold stars for showing up to things. we just want to know you're okay. Like, if people aren't around for a while, my thought is more, I hope that person's okay, as opposed to, where have they been? Like, that never goes through my head. We have an annual retreat every year, and sometimes that's the only thing that people will go to. And they're just happy to go to the retreat once a year, and that's all they need. They don't need to come in every month. And then we have people that come to every event, right? So for me, it's like, I don't feel differently about the people that come to every event and the people, I mean, like, hi, Kathy, it's so good to see you. Like, I'm like, I haven't seen you since the retreat. Yeah. And I like, probably, that's the next time I'll see you. And so for me, it's like, take what you need from this and leave behind what you don't. There's no ego attached to participation. So what I would say is, if you're in here today and this is resonating in some way, we're going to go to the table, Bad Believer table, so you can come hang out with us there and talk more. But in general, if you go to badbeliever.org, which is our website, there's a place there to like sign up for an initial call, which is the call, and that's a call with me. I feel like early in there was maybe chat about me not always doing them, but I was like, I love them. There's something about, I was saying that it was very early in that I knew, I was like, this is what I do well and this is what I shouldn't do. And that is, I think, something I do well. I love, and I hope that doesn't come across egotistical. It's like knowing what you do well. And that's even with volunteers. I'm like, what do you do well? Claim that. Like, claim what you do well, and let's just place you in those spots. So I feel like I love holding space for people to feel welcome and safe. That is my passion. So for me, that's what I focus on now. I don't focus on all the things, but that's what I keep focusing on.
You do a very good job.
Thank you. But that's what I'm like, I want to do that. And Avery's like, I'll do that. And Ashley, I'll do that. So they think it's a matter of like delegating in a way that really makes sense. So the initial call is with me, and it's a small group, sometimes 3, sometimes 6, but not any more than that. So, but if that feels uncomfortable to you, if you're like, I don't want to do that, then you just email us, and you can literally just have like a quick chat with Avery or someone else on our welcome team. And that is really just because we can't have people jumping into our servers and stuff without us knowing them, just to maintain the safety for everyone in the room. So, and it's really that simple. Like, we get to know you in some way, and then we welcome you in. And then someone from the welcome team will be like, how can we serve you? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want us to get you on Discord? Sometimes people are like, oh my God, no, I do not want to do another online thing. Or like, definitely if people are like a little bit older, they're just like, what? No. I remember when we went on Discord, everyone was like, the learning curve, I think sometimes, it's just, people are like, I don't want to deal with that. So then don't do that. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And then you're in. And then it's just a matter of, I will say, I do think with all things in life, you get from things what you give. So if you are coming to things, I do think that that's a way to be supported. But otherwise, if you just need to get an email or connect with someone from the peer support team, that's all good too. I feel like we're probably halfway through. Do we want to? Are we? What time are we at? 2:30. 2:30 on the dot?
2:32.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
We wanted to open up the floor a little bit to however people feel comfortable. I think we were wanting to potentially just open the floor to, we can ask a prompt potentially and just see if someone feels comfortable answering, just so we can get to know you a bit more, so we're not just talking at you. Do you want to lead that, or do you want me to?
Do you have one in mind?
No, but you always have prompts.
Great.
Okay, great. I will, before you do that, I will say, okay, so Avery leads pretty much all of our like workshops or anything that could get heavy, just because they're so great at holding space. They also taught me the power of silence. So there will be times in a call where sometimes no one will say anything, and my skin will crawl. But Avery is but then it's what I've learned so much doing this. Sometimes what I have noticed, even when we had money to offer for therapy, there are so many souls that are like, there's someone else that needs this more. So sometimes people need silence to feel permission, because then they're like, okay, if no one else is going, I guess I'll go. Even though they need to go. It's like they're so polite. So Avery's been so great at that. But oftentimes we'll show up to our workshops with how many prompts?
Look, I started with like 10 prompts per hour-long workshop.
Yes. How many do we get through?
1.5.
One. Yeah.
I'm down to doing 3. We still get to 1.5.
Which is good. Just means people have a lot to say.
That's right.
Yeah.
And normally we end up not even close to where we started.
Sure.
Which is wonderful. So, I'm going to start with a question for you.
Oh, all right.
Okay? And then we can toss it up.
Okay.
So, what would you say are the top 3 things that you have learned from this community over the past 3 years? And there can be like the themes that come up the most that you realize sort of are more universal than you thought, or things that other folks have reflected back to you that have helped you learn something about yourself or your own experience.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be 3, but 3's my lucky number. So there you
3.
go.
Okay. So things that have come up. Well, like I mentioned earlier, there is a fear of the afterlife. A lot of fear of like what's going to happen in the next. Familial issues. Big. And again, like in my concert last night, sometimes people have an experience where their families rally. Sometimes, I won't name names, but there's a specific community member I can think of that is literally a salt of the earth human. And her mother cannot love her. And it is, I like weep about it because I'm just like, you are missing out on the glory and beauty of that human because of this. And I get it. I know it's hard. I used to be a pastor. I went to Bible college. Like, I used to be the person that thought it was wrong. I get it. But at the end of the day, what I notice happens a lot is that when family, when it's over there, people don't really get it. But then when it's your kid, often parents will find a way to rally to like either understand it but there are totally people whose families do not do that. So I would say that is a big one, just the range and the range of outness. I think a lot of people come in feeling a pressure to be out. And so that's what I've learned. I've learned a lot from you, and I've learned a lot from the people in the group. But one thing is that I've realized that it does not need to look any specific way. I do think that in my brain I was like, being out is the way it should be for people. There are times where we've realized that it is not safe for people to be out because maybe they still live at home, maybe they're in a city or a place. So really it's like, it's not a one size fits all, even with outness. So I think that has been. Can I toss that back to you? And then, okay, what about you?
So I think the biggest thing that I continue to learn is how universal our experiences are, even if the worlds we come from are different, right? So when we talk about things like feeling a sense of shame around stuff, that we can explore shame altogether, and we all may have gotten different messages about shame growing up. So you may have gotten these messages about shame, I got these messages about shame, but we've internalized them, and now we're working through these messages of shame sort of in different ways, but in community with each other, right? So I was sort of prompted a couple weeks ago by somebody in the community because I had something really big going on in my life that I wasn't really talking about. And when they were asking me about it, I realized that it was shame that was keeping me from that, right? And the community was sort of helping to remind me of that. So I think that's one thing that I've learned is the universality of our experiences. I think I've also learned how incredibly kind people can be.
That's
right?
a nice realization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The world can be terrible,
Yes.
right? And we see all of these folks coming in, and folks that are coming in with different challenges in their lives and different things that they're experiencing and different histories that they're coming from. And we all sit together, and we may have nothing else in common, right? We may not like the same things, we may not have the same politics, we may not come from the same country, we may not have the same history. And folks come together and have these really beautiful conversations where they're able to hear each other and hold each other and support each other, right? And the world doesn't see that a ton. And then we see it in these Zooms, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, because we have Republicans and Democrats in
Yep.
our group. Yeah, so it's like we need to find a way, and it's a small group. But when it's a country, it's hard.
Right.
But we like it is nice to on a smaller level to be like we will find a way to see each other, and we're committed to that, and that's important. Yeah.
And the last thing, what did I say? Three feels like that.
I know when you said three,
know.
I was like, whoa.
That's my lucky numbers. That's my bad. I think the third thing is we have so many folks that have so many beautiful realizations with each other, and folks that just light up because they're thinking through something for the first time.
Yeah.
Right? Like they might be hearing for the first time, this is a message that you received, you didn't ask for, and you don't have to continue holding it. And you can watch someone sort of light up with finally getting permission to sort of put something down and having people around them that are like, yes, put this down. We encourage you to put this down. You can put it right here.
Yeah.
We'll kick it under the table. You never have to see it again, right? And how beautiful that is.
I love that. Well, I know, so I'll share just a quick story even for myself. Like, I get just as much from this as the founder as anyone else. Like, I for sure come in like, oh, I'm a mess right now. Like, it's my community too. And I remember I was writing my new record, and were anyone at the concert last night? Okay, a couple people. Yes, a lot of you. So I wrote a song, I sang a song last night that I wrote to my mom and dad, which was like a love song to them for holding me. And I was really struggling with the second verse because we were going, it's like this a lot with family. You have this initial, you come out, they love you, so they want to hold you. And then you go through like a weird period where the rubber kind of hits the road. And I think I had started writing the song before the weird period. And it's not like anything was bad. It was just like realities kind of settling in. And I was like, I cannot, because the first verse is like very like syrupy, lovey. Like, I've never been held this way. And it was kind of like a romantic relationship where it's like honeymoon period. You're like, wow, you really do love me. And then I felt like I have to say something in the second verse that speaks to the journey that's a little tougher. And it was in one of the calls where we were talking about family, and we were talking about how part of this is embracing the journey with that human, holding space. We talk a lot about reparenting, like there's a lot of sometimes having to take over the parental role and having to hold grace and love for them, if they're treating you well. Sometimes you have to have boundaries. Boundaries is another big one that comes up a lot. But it was in that call, and I remember it was just like I was having this massive, and the words just started coming. And so I had my head down, I think, in the call, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the second verse. This is the second verse. It's right, it's here, it just like spilled out, and I had my head down. And I obviously in the calls try to be very present. And I think someone was like, are you okay? Was he used to? Are you okay? And I was like, I just finished the song. Like in this session, it came to me, and that was the lyric that we're still taking time to understand how to shift when things don't go as planned. But like a house that's built on the rock, storms roll off, we still stand. Because it was like, no, yeah, this is not easy. We're gonna have to hunker down, but our foundation is there. And when the foundation is there, and that's obviously a biblical, when you build a house on the rock or the sand, right? That's like a big analogy in the Bible. And so that's an example of how, like, in that call, and I think it really is just talking it out. We just have to talk it out. And sometimes there's very few places to do that. So I love that. Are you wanting to throw to that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
What are you gonna throw?
Let's see, what am I gonna throw? Okay, so you asked how many folks come from sort of a religious background who grew up
Yes.
sort of in the church. So how many of you, regardless of your background, feel like you got the message that spirituality and sexuality were sort of incompatible things? Yeah.
Everybody, yeah. Okay,
Great.
right.
So that's a great example of how this sort of seeps in, because regardless of whether you heard that coming from an altar or heard it just from kind of existing in the world, that's something that you all sort of picked up, whether you asked for it or not, right? Can anyone think, as we're talking, did anyone else sort of resonate with any sort of messages that you feel like you got that are lingering with you now, whether or not they were things that you sort of asked for? So that may be messages about sexuality or gender, it may be messages about what's right or wrong, messages about what you should feel guilt or shame about, anything like that. Yeah.
I would say there were churches that were like welcoming,
Uh-huh.
like you're welcome here. But then when you walk to the nitty gritty of like, well, this is my community, I would like to get married here,
Yeah.
like build my family here. They're like, oh no. And like that's because of our whatever background.
Yeah.
That's not what I really feel, but we're attached to this.
Yep.
And so it's like you're welcome, but you're not.
And how does that make you feel?
Like shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great example, right? Because it's that sort of bait word of welcoming.
Like gaslighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
The bait and switch. The bait and switch. Yeah.
And the idea that you are welcome in, but you are not welcome to bring your full self or to be a full participant.
You're like tolerated.
Yeah.
You're not even accepted.
Yes. Yeah, and I think we've had a lot of folks talk about having similar experiences and how sometimes that's almost even more painful than the churches that are
Yes.
sort of out on the front lawn saying, you know,
It's like a
you aren't welcome.
second coming out.
Yeah.
It's like the first coming out is hardest. You find a place, and it's like a second step. And you're like, wow, well, I really tried. Now I'm gonna care.
Yes.
It's even more painful. Yeah, because you were vulnerable, and then your vulnerability is, yeah. And it's it's the whole clarity is kindness thing.
Yep.
The problem is, and I can say this coming from a person who used to do this, is that when you have a belief system that is based on a book and that is finite, the amount of mental gymnastics that folks have to do, I actually genuinely think that some churches are like, no, we do love you, but it's just the way it is. But the problem is it's like these are having to hold to these laws forces people to kind of like become masters of a spin. Because I think they genuinely, I mean, if you look at, if we use Christianity, we talk about this a lot. The figure of Jesus was this radical socialist who did things that religious people were like, what are you doing? And now this is where we're at? But I really do think that love and acceptance is supposed to be the basis of that. And I think that folks in those churches really do believe that. But I think that, and I know this because I talk to my dad about it a lot, I don't think a lot of them see how that's painful. Because they're like, well, yeah, but we love you. It's like, right, but you still think that it's like sexuality is like this part of you that's over here when they don't realize it's here. It's not like the same. It's like, well, it's like every other sin. I'm like, it's not really the same as when I stole a chapstick from Walmart. Like it's not. Like, but they're like, it's all the same. I'm like, but it's not. Like, I can understand why. Like, I shouldn't steal chapstick from Walmart, but I'm not supposed to love her. I do think that that's why it's hard. Yeah, that's a really good one, and that is something that it's the love the sinner, hate the sin. And the other day I heard someone say the rebuttal to it is love the believer, hate the belief. It's like the spin of it. Yeah.
Other folks that may have things that as Adaline said, I can make y'all sit in silence.
Oh,
for
I know.
very
I
long.
literally just in my head was like, you are going to count to 10. What's the question again?
What's the question again? I think the question, I don't remember the question.
Well, like the things that resonate
Great.
from, Like so from our chats,
Yep.
what is like, is there anything from your life that's resonated? Like this is something from my experience, like a message that you feel like you've received that is something that you still think about.
Yeah, something that you were given that maybe you don't have to hold.
The shame and the internalized homophobia.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about that for 1 second.
Let's talk about it.
Internalized
Oh,
homophobia.
I had so much fun spending an entire month talking about internalized homophobia. I really, a friend of mine, I did an Instagram, which not my fave, but
Yeah.
and a friend of mine was like, "You were really smiling big talking about that internalized homophobia." I was like, "I know." And the reason why is because it is this thing that for queer folks that we all have, but it's like this secret silent thing that we don't actually even realize, and then it pops up in all of these different ways, and all of a sudden you're like, I thought that was gone. And it is because we are all raised in this society that is giving us all of these continual messages about that queerness is wrong, or that there's something shameful and bad about it. And you get those messages before you are ever aware of even what it means to be queer. And so then when you are discovering yourself and who you are at whatever time that happens, you are sitting on a mountain of those stories. And we have this expectation that you come out and you're suddenly at the bottom of that mountain. You're not, you're still on top of it. And so having to work through those messages and not just accept who you are, but also love who you are, and also remind yourself that those messages that you heard are not the truth.
Can you give an example of like a way that someone would be like, oh, there's an example of internalized homophobia?
So a good example is worrying about what people might think when you come out, or walking down the street and being worried about holding your partner's hand, not because of a fear of violence or anything else, but not wanting other folks' judgment,
Yes.
right? So the assumption that you have that other folks are going to be judging you or sort of thinking negative things about you because of who you are.
Or if you're codependent like me, it's like worrying that I'm going to make them uncomfortable.
Yes.
And wanting to cater. So let me throw this question. Oh gosh, this is fun to me too,
Yeah.
because the raise of hands. For those of you that were churched, how many of you in adulthood have realized that you are battling with people pleasing? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's a huge one, and I think it has a lot to do with, we've talked about this a lot, when you're in a community, there's like that hive mind and everyone has to kind of fall into order. There's a lot of pushing on, there's a lot of lack of boundaries, so the idea that someone can come up to you at any time and be like, how's your walk with God? And that you're just supposed to answer. And if you don't answer, you're not like just opening up about it. Ooh, that's not a good sign. Like, and so then you're like constantly in this state of trying to placate and look a certain. There's a lot of just holding space for other people, and so I think that a lot of us have noticed that we do have a little bit of that sort of caring a lot about other people's feelings and abandoning ourselves in the process. So that would be something I would think about. And I have thought in the past when I'm holding hands with someone, it's like, okay, even when we talk about going to see my parents, like I realize that a lot of it, or even when we were with your parents, my thought was, I don't want to make them uncomfortable. You have less of that, which is awesome. It's always good to be with someone who's a little less people-pleasy than you are, because if you're both people-pleasers, it's a bit rough. But yeah, that's a great example. Yeah.
Can any other folks think of ways that they've experienced internalized homophobia, or ways that it's come up for them, and it doesn't necessarily,
I was just thinking about like when you say worrying that other people particularly say that when I first moved into my town life, I emailed somebody the apartment and I said, oh, me and my roommate, and when he showed up, because I was like, well, we're just gonna show up, and it was a one-bedroom apartment, so he was like, I don't know, it's a little bit small for a roommate, and I said, no, we want to come see it still, it's fine, and then we met that, and it was fine, but or even like wedding venues, I think it's like, you never know what they're gonna say or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things we talk about is how constantly exhausting that is to have to navigate that.
And those landlords actually came to our wedding, so that
Oh, lovely.
Oh, good. That's a great
Wonderful
example.
outcome. Yeah. But having to sort through all of that, or even sometimes what it is as you're sort of further along the process, is those messages come up and then we judge ourselves for them coming up, right? That you sort of have that hesitation of holding someone's hand and you're like, wait, why am I doing that? I should be further along, or I shouldn't be so worried about everyone else. And we're judging ourselves for that. And that just sort of continues to add on.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of having this community in place where we can talk about those things is to have other folks say, yeah, I felt that too, right? And all of that sort of lessens the shame. Brene Brown, who is much more eloquent than I am, one of the things that she says is the antidote to shame is talking about things, is letting them out, is finding a supportive community that can hold the things that you're feeling. And that's what dissipates it. And we have this community that is like, yes, bring us the things that you are feeling or these messages that you have, and let's talk about them, right?
Yeah.
Let's find community in them. And in that, as they get out in the air, that's where they dissipate.
Yeah, well, it makes me think of, again, I'm sorry, I keep going back to my record, but it's because it's about Bad Believer. But the opening track on it is voices from our community, little snippets of voices from different people speaking truths. And it reminds me of Rachel's quote, which is, "You're only as sick as your darkest secret. Bring your hurts into the light." I do think that shame thrives in dark. We all know that. I mean, I think that's, so it is about, and that's why this is so great, because we're not saying that you don't have to come out to the world. You can just come in our little safe space and bring some of that into the light. You don't have to be out everywhere. Just be out somewhere that feels safe. And you know, that is, I think, important just to start processing through that. Ooh, we have 5 minutes. Anyone else want to share something?
Or does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, did you want to share something? Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That
It's so hard.
that desire to sort of protect other people and to also sort of protect yourself, right? Of not wanting to have the people closest to you feel like they're judging you in any way. That can be such a hard and tiring thing to hold.
And that's why it's tricky, is because, and that's one thing I've learned in this, is that there is no advice, that it's not a one size fits all with this situation. Like, I would have to know you really well to be able to be like, I think it's time for you to go for it. Like, I think it's time for you to claim who you are and go for it. And it's never going to be easy to do that. I think there are moments, though, where it's like, this is the moment to take the step. But then I could also get to know you and be like, maybe it's not safe to take the step, right? So I think that's why it's helpful to have community, to talk it through, just to get to know each other, and to the point where I'm like, and we would never tell you what to do, but I can think of many times where you've been like, yeah, maybe it's not safe if you're feeling unsafe, or yeah, it's time. And that's why this is all so tricky, but that's why talking about it helps. Yeah. I love it. We have time for one question. Yeah.
I would love to know, just maybe from your personal or people that you're thinking about do you find that, like, what is your spiritual life
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's hard to find a place where you feel welcome and accepted, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so is Bad Believer like that community for you? Or like how do you know what I mean?
That's a very good question. And it is kind of speaks to the core of who we are. Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think it's such a great question because broadly, one of the beautiful things about our community is when we talk about that spectrum, we have some folks in our community that are deeply connected and committed to their home churches or spiritual communities, that is a vital part of their lives. They feel welcome or accepted, or they just feel really connected. We have folks that are like, absolutely not. That is not for me anymore. I want to heal from what's happened, but that's not something. And we have lots of folks that are like, I am trying to figure this out for me now. I'm trying to figure out what that looks like. Does that look like continuing to sort through the background that I came from and those messages? Does it look like exploring different faith practices? Does it look like looking into myself and figuring out spirituality for me? And we have all of those conversations at once, which is so cool and rare, right? So, I think for me, I've been exploring all kinds of things in ways that have felt really interesting and exciting and fun. I love having the conversations around biblical teachings and sort of exploring those when I can make it, but I also love learning more about meditation and getting more into a lot of spiritual practices that feel like home to me, and defining spirituality as, I feel closest to God or whatever that means to me when I'm on a mountain or standing in a bunch of trees. And I can find as much meaning in some of my favorite poets as I do in the Bible, and both of those can really sort of light me up. And it's just kind of a journey, and I feel so heard and held in that journey and all of the people in this community. Yeah.
That was nice.
Thanks.
I love that. Yeah, I would say that's really what this is, right? Is we're the idea of Bad Believer is to explore this together. And you are right. Some people are like, I miss this. But the question is, does it have to look like that? And I think that my spiritual life really exploded when I realized that the world in which I was told was religion was really just something that was created by people, by a society, by rulers, by politicians, by whatever else, and that my spiritual life is divinely mine. And that if I go to church or if I don't go to church, that's not a dictation of my spirituality. So I do think that it is about having permission to connect with God, with spirit, whatever you want it to be, or in the way that feels right. I remember I had a really powerful moment of like going back, and I used to lead worship in my church, and I went through a period of time where I could not hear a praise and worship song without like my skin crawling. And I realized it was because I was in dissonance with God. It felt painful. When I was able to reclaim my spiritual life and reclaim my relationship with God that's uniquely mine, I went back and put on, there were some songs I needed to skip because they were super salvation-y, and that was like, I didn't like that. But there were a couple, because I don't believe in hell anymore. But there were a couple of ones that were worship in a sense of like adoring like this creator, like this divine presence. And I just wept. Like I just was like, oh, there it is. Because I loved that part of me growing up. And it's hard to, I felt like I had to abandon it. It was like I have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what I'm realizing as an adult is that's not true. We're told that because it's an all or nothing environment. And that's so unfair. That's not how humans work. So we're not an all or nothing community. I don't think God, if there's a God, I don't think God's like, it's all me or none of me. Like, it's just like, I just can't imagine. Life is complex and messy and hard. So really, it's just about forming that for yourself. So, yeah. So if you're interested, come hang out with us. Yeah. We would love to see you. And if not, we're just love to be in community with you in some way. So I'll keep in touch.
Thanks for coming, y'all.
Thank you, everybody.